Thanks again, folks. Just regard this now as our break, a commercial break, prelude to our next event. So at this moment, I'm going to invite Mrs. Norma Williams, who represents our EdTech Jamaica, and in her own right as faculty dean at CASE, Dean of Education at College of Arts, of Agriculture, Science and Education. So she will moderate this aspect, and remember, it is a pitch of ideas or of products. So I hand over to her, and then after that, we will move into our ICT roundtable. So she has about 15 minutes just to make that, to organize persons with a pitch. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Now, we have what is called an Innovators Showcase. The idea is that you're traveling in an elevator, and there is Bill Gates or the other guy who died. And you need to, and you need to pitch your product. You have a product, so you have only just this amount of time to, just the time that you're in the elevator to tell him everything about your product. So you have to be tight. So this is what we have now, that we're gonna have 5 individuals present their products, and they will have to tell you all about it within the 3 minutes that they'll get. So we have starting Digicel, Income Tech, IncomeX, and you will see them later on. We have Daniel Wisdom with his LMS. We have Ricardo Gale, and we have Cheetah tablets. So we're starting 1, 2, 3. Come.
Sorry.
3 minutes.
We won't need 3 minutes. Tell me when I'm ready. Hi, afternoon everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I'm Austin Briscoe, the product manager for the business solutions team at Digicel. I'm happy to see everyone in attendance. This is my first education symposium, and what they've asked me to quickly speak to you guys on this afternoon is our Office 365 for education or academic institutions. Office 365, for everyone who may not know already, is the more or less online version of Office. Your regular Word, Excel, PowerPoint, including Outlook, including your any other tool that would be included in the Microsoft Office suite. But the difference with this is that it's per month payment, and it gives you access to all of the newest updates from Microsoft. Let me also say to you that Digicel is a current gold partner with Microsoft, and we've recently attained our CSP, which is Cloud Service Partner, and to offer you guys Office 365 education plan, we've also attained our academic partnership with Microsoft. To show or share with you a little bit more about the product, I have a quick video that I'm gonna ask these guys to queue up for me. So this is Office 365 education plan.
Once there was a teacher who wanted her students to learn, but the demands on her time kept growing and growing. In the beginning, she was overwhelmed by lesson plans, grading, schedules, and textbooks. With so many students and 5 classes a day, the clock was always ticking away. Until one day she discovered Office 365 Education. It was full of powerful tools built just for teachers and students, and it was completely free. These tools helped her manage everything in one place. They helped her organize and distribute lessons, and even work with fellow teachers and administrators. The best part was, because everything worked with the documents and devices that her and her students already used, they didn't have to worry about setup. They could get right to learning. With Office Online, students could work together, even outside the classroom, and the teacher could be there every step of the way to give feedback. Many of her students had different learning needs, and she wanted to make sure she could reach them all. Her visual learners could write notes with digital ink, and auditory learners could use learning tools to have any text read back to them. In fact, every moment became an opportunity to learn, because with Sway, content and experiences came to life as interactive reports and presentations that could be designed automatically and shared instantly. With all of these tools, the students were ready for the world, because Office 365 education meant that time no longer ruled the classroom, so the teacher felt empowered to focus on her greatest passion, teaching. Get Office 365 for free at office.com/teachers.
Yes, in fact, thank you very much. This is in fact free, and it is also bundled with our network and administrative infrastructure package we call Office in a Box. So that's a server, a dedicated server, a router, a switch, and access points for anywhere between 15 to 45 seats. So we pair Office 365 with that kind of infrastructure, with digital networking and connectivity, with our security platform, and with our co-location or backup solution. So all of that we've basically designed and put forward for any academic institution that's interested. More information on this is by the digital booth, so just pass by and speak to anybody at the digital booth and they'll be able to give you more information on all of this. Thank you guys so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claudia Bermudez, and I am the commercial manager for IncomeX Jamaica. I'm very happy to have such a beautiful audience today, as it gives me the opportunity to present what we do around Latin America and the Caribbean. IncomeX Jamaica is the largest distributor, supplier of solutions for information technology, and we operate from 15 different countries in the Caribbean, Central and South America. Particularly for our audience today, we are able to present what we consider is the new concept of education. We have been very successful, and we have deployed 7 million devices in the entire region with the use of the content that we have through Aula 365. And for the Spanish speakers, it's pronounced Aula 365. In here, we are going to see how the new concept of education is coming from collaborative and creativity from the kids. I'm gonna show this video first, and then we will go to see how the application is able to be uploaded into the various devices. And we also have a mobile application, Aula 365.
I just have a really cool class. Our teacher gave us a newspaper to work in class today, but it was way much more than that.
Direct your own movie. Create it now. Know the T-Rex, the most incredible dinosaur that lived 65 million years ago. It was 5 meters high and weighed 7 tons.
We use it to learn, play, and create. With this app, each class is an adventure. I really like it. I can get in touch with other kids from all over the world. We can help each other with our homework and learn with movies in the language I choose. I love Aula 365. It's my favorite learning tool.
With Aula 365 app mobile, the learning process is augmented, and it has never been so fun.
And having seen this, we also see where the advantage of our partnership in the region is that it's fully customizable for each one of our countries. We have worked with Argentina, Uruguay, Mexico, Colombia, Panama, and we are able to work in conjunction with the various ministries in these countries, and we customize the content to suit what, in some particular instances, will be referred as more of a local or cultural concept. And we also support television content. We provide a free television program that will support and will allow children to interact from home, fully managed, whether the schools have internet or no internet access. So we are going to invite you to come to our booth at the end, and you will be able to see how it works and the advantages that Aula 365 will bring in the future in Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Wisdom, and I'm the creator of Total School. Now, a few years ago, we were using an SMS system that we were not satisfied with. Also, we were using websites for schools that did not offer much. I came up with a solution that would ensure that websites were used the way they were meant to be, but in a different way. What we used was Google Apps for Education. How many persons in here know Google? How many persons in here know Google Apps for Education? Now, with Total School, we are able to, one, ensure that the school that we are operating with has a website. Their own website that shows exactly their purpose. Two, it's local. From a teacher's perspective, for 23 years, I was able to capture every data possible, and it keeps on improving. Dashboard for vice principals, principals, bursar. We also had students. We had academic reports, transcripts. We were also able to cumulatively assess students. We have exams that are online using Google Apps. So we have a wonderful site. We are now able to offer it to primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary institutions. What makes Total School different is that Google Apps for Education is free. It means that every single member of that domain has the capacity for Hangouts, Google Classroom, and these are some of the things we are using, Hangouts, conferences. We use it in such a way that we are able to visually sell a school. It is not a software. It is not a program. We come into your school, we look at what it is that you want to do, and we create exactly what it is that you want. Let's share a story. My wife works at my school, and because I have a system in place, they ensure that she's on the events committee. And the first thing they give you is prize giving. Of course, she came home, and she wanted from the system all the persons for prize giving, top performers. In 15 minutes, we were able to set it up that automatically from then going forward until whenever, these lists will be pulled automatically. A week ago, we had NEI coming in for panel inspection, and you know that most persons kind of fear it. We were able to pull data real time from the grade books, giving statistics in real time. It also covered the census. So as long as we populated the grade book, the census that was being done was automatic. Our diagnostic tests, our placement of students, our IDs were all created and saved as PDFs in the cloud, served on drives, stored on the computers that would necessarily need them. What it therefore means is this: Total School can compete with just about any SMS company coming in locally or overseas. We also know that given time, Total School is going to be one of those SMS. And here's the most interesting part. As Google improves, so does my system. Think about lesson plans that you don't have to submit. It's in your drive. Think about minutes that you will automatically just save, and that would be it. Total school is the future. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. All right, I'm Ricardo. Test. Okay. Good evening again. No, I'm Ricardo Gale, formerly from the multimedia team at the University of Technology, where I did a lot of software for them. I did the online hot job system for UTech. I did the online health center. And now I am at Clancarty Primary, where I give IT support. And I teach and I manage a few of their programs. Now, I'm here to talk to you about this initiative. After talking to the principal at Clancarty Primary and other educators in the system, there was this great need for something of this nature. I know that there are a lot of SMS out there, a lot of school management systems, including the popular RenReb, but they were very expensive. And so the thrust was there, and this initiative came about. I developed it using Bootstrap, and it's on the PHP MySQL platform, and it's a Web 2.2 app. So everybody's going cloud, so the app is in the cloud. I want you to click on the link that I gave you, please, which is, right, so with this type of system, we are given what the other SMS are not doing. We're, upon registration, upon using this system, automatically you're given a website. Can you click on Clancarty for me? So Clancarty is the only school right now that is using it. It is not completed. It's about 60%, because the reports are not yet done. So I'm going to do a lot of reports, performance monitoring instrument, and other stuff. So you can check to see which grade is performing better than another grade, or so forth. All kind of reports. Now, Clancarty Primary have a website where they can put up events and news, and they can put up videos and so forth. So that's the front end right there. But there's a back end where they can manage the students, they can manage the staff and the students. So I am giving the community something that is affordable, more affordable, because I know that there are many out there. And it is robust. It is also adaptive to the whatever environment they use it on. So if it's on the mobile platform, then it adapts to the mobile. All right? Thank you very much.
Final presenter, Cheetah. Play the music. Cue music. Music, please.
CHEETAH is an acronym that stands for Connect to Higher Education, Electronic Tools, Application, and Help, and that sums up all of what we do. We provide educational products, including our own brand of tablet PCs, and I'm just going to do a show and tell. We have our own brand of tablets called Cheetah Tab that's already in schools across Jamaica. What we have done, we have taken an holistic approach, and we have married
our device with applications. So we have preloaded applications that we own that are proprietary to our tablets, and we have also partnered with other people. So we have created apps that are conducive to the Jamaican curriculum. So when you get one of our tablets, we have what our philosophy is, a plug-and-go philosophy. So we have our tablets, we have our animated characters with the cheetah being the main character. And in addition to the tablets, we have various books that encourage students. It empowers, it enriches them, and it entertains them. Right now, we have a newly released book, a new set of books actually called EGSAT. These are based on the actual GSAT paper. It helps students to prepare for GSAT, and it's for those students in primary school levels. We have one for each subject area, one of the 5 subject core areas. And right now, I'm displaying what we call a mathematical book. Math practice stats for GSAT, and we have aligned one of our characters, which is the dog, Barky Bark, the math detective. So once student has purchased our books, we have different incentive programs, and then at the very end, they're eligible to receive one of our toys. And we have tested our curriculum. It worked very well. In fact, I went back to the school that I attended many moons ago. I'm from Port Antonio, and I went back to Kenride Primary School. We did the program there, and the kids did very well. In fact, we worked with them for 4 weeks. We used the toys as an incentive, the toys on our tablets, and at the very end, when the actual results came out, they got the very good results for the first time in years. They were able to score 86 and 90s, and were able to go to their high school of their choice, which is the school that I also went to, Titchfield High School. We also have different books. Cheetahs Go to College, and a lot of our books have been reviewed and endorsed by the Ministry of Education. This one, Cheetahs Go to College, it encourages children to have a no-excuse attitude towards school. So what we have done, Mr. Owl in the story wants to start a school in the animal kingdom, but then each animal he encountered had a different reason for not going to school. So it's based on the animal's tendency. I know I'm talking fast, so I'm hoping you're listening fast. And they all wanted to start a school, so the birds had to fly south, the bears had to hibernate, the lions were arrogant, how dare you try to teach us anything, we were the kings and queens of the jungle. But then we know why the cheetahs became the fastest of all the land animals. They went to Mr. Owl's school. And so in addition to the tablets or books, we also have different apps. We are going to be launching a new app called EGSAT. The light version is currently available on the Google Play Store. And what we have done, we have structured a lot of past papers and married it with key concepts. And we have an assessment that a child has to do first. Based on that assessment, you're able to review the results right away. It stimulates the actual test. You could review, you could redo, and then ultimately they are able to do different practice tests with voice simulation and so on, and then do a final test. So we have created a holistic approach. Cheetah, if you thought about it, we are cheating poverty, we are cheating mediocrity, we are cheating laziness, we are cheating excuses. We want our children to excel, and we do it in a fun and entertaining way. My name is Dr. Paula Trowers, and I approve this message. Thank you.
Bravo. I'll tell you, this would work. This would work. Yeah. Hold up the cheetah. Let it, just start it. I want to thank all our innovators, especially since they responded at short notice. You did very, very well. Thank you. And thanks to our audience. Tomorrow, we'll have another set of innovators. So please be there. And we may have prizes and surprises, so you don't want to miss that, right?
Thank you. Yes, we're inviting persons now to sit as soon as you find a seat, because we're bringing in more. If there's a seat beside you, just raise your hand, please, because there are some seats here, all right? But we will have everybody seated, so as soon as the seats come in, please just be seated. All right. At this point, we're going straight into our ICT in roundtable, in education roundtable discussion. So I'm going to invite to the platform in this order. I'm going to invite Mr. Christopher Record to the platform that we can take our seats there. Mr. Record is an IT entrepreneur with 30 years of experience in the IT industry, including a range of executive management roles, locally and overseas. He helped to create and grow organizations such as innovative systems, innovative corporate solutions, and non-IT ventures in the hospitality industry. All right, as he takes his seat, yeah, over here, right? I'll be in the middle there. He's currently responsible for sales and marketing at leading IT support organizations, T-Tech Limited. He serves as chairman of the eLearning Jamaica Limited board. All right, next I invite Mr. Trevor Forrest to take his seat on the platform, Senior Advisor on Technology to Dr. the Honorable Andrew Wheatley, who is Minister of Science, Energy and Technology. So Mr. Forrest will help us to summarize the findings of assessments on the impact of the e-learning project and the tablets in school project, okay, and the challenges. We'll speak again to that, okay. Ms. Bellany, Education Specialist, IADB, Jamaica. Invite her to take her place on the stage. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Bellany, right, she'll be describing the IDB experience in establishing and promoting the use of ICTs in learning over the last decade. I'll invite Mr. Michael Tricano, Senior Education and Technology Policy Specialist, Global Lead for Innovation in Education, World Bank. Okay, can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Okay, so we'll balance it, Ms. Belloni. Have them in the middle. Okay, thank you. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, for the ICT in roundtable discussion, which we are now, okay. We have each of our discussants who represent an agency in this roundtable, representing an agency which plays a significant role in guiding and implementing ICT in education interventions in Jamaica and around the world. So they are with us today to share their experience and knowledge as we consider the role of appropriate national ICT in education policy as one of the key drivers of social and economic transformation. The objectives then is that we will seek to raise the awareness this afternoon as to the challenges inherent in the effort to transform education with ICT at the international, regional, and the national level. We're also seeking out of this conversation to develop the best approach and ideas to reviewing and revising and remaking the 2030 Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, the ICT in Education policy. So after we have shared a bit, we're going to invite questions from the audience because we want this to be a dialogue. We want to have what we call increased stakeholder participation in discussing the way forward. And out of this conference, we want to affect the type of considerations and decisions moving forward because we do talk about a 2030 vision for Jamaica. We also want to know that out of this conference, beyond what we have been doing in the sessions, that we're able to put together the sort of mandate to guide Jamaica, but not only Jamaica, but what happens in the Caribbean region. And I want to also just mention at this point that this conference is a stepping stone to a larger effort called Virtua Educa that we will be doing with the Organization of American States. So we want all the input this afternoon, and we will ask our experts to go ahead, and we will then invite the questions. So we'll invite Mr. Record in particular to speak to the main strategies that eLearning Jamaica has been and is using to bring the ICTs into the Jamaican classroom. So at this point, I will invite Mr. Record to speak briefly for about 10 minutes on what the considerations are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 10 minutes is not enough to talk about all the fantastic things that e-learning has been doing, but I will try my very best, right, Avril?
So, as I sat here listening to our moderator lead off, I reflected on the fact that I don't know how long it was, Avril, maybe, I don't know,
20 odd years when Jamaica Computer Society Education Foundation, and which has somehow morphed and morphed and morphed, and we're now here. So what has e-learning been doing? I'm sure everyone here has been impacted by e-learning. Do you have an e-learning lab at your schools? I would assume that everyone has almost, right? We hope so. 203 schools. So back in 2005, the idea was created, and the whole concept was to deliver education to as many persons as possible using technology.
and the way at the time that was considered was simply putting in labs in schools at the time.
One of the basis of the discussions back then was there are a few amazing teachers that somehow have the magical gift to impart certain knowledge in a student's head. And then there we have a lot of other great teachers that somehow it is just easier for them to get across certain concepts. So why not use technology to capture all of that, those methods, those special ways, record it, put it in one central place, and then disperse it to everyone. So the persons who
don't have the ability to go to that specific school
are all able to get that information. And that was one component of what drove
the original e-learning project, which I call
labs in schools, because we refer to the new one as tablets in schools. So back then, the funding came from the Universal Services Fund, called Universal Access Fund at the time, and 203 institutions were targeted. Well, eventually it became to 203 institutions, started out at about 116, or that's a smaller number. And so labs were placed in all of these schools. What has been the impact? So the impact has been very far-reaching. Over 250,000 students touched per year. Full labs, servers, PCs, and I consider most important the content. The content for 11 subjects for the entire CSEC for 11 subjects being digitized, captured, learning materials, students, and more importantly for teachers, so the TIMS and SIMS as we refer to it, teaching instructional materials, students materials, all digitized and all placed for access. I know there was some point in time where there was debate as to who would have access to it, but I think we're at a place right now that e-learning is free learning, as our former chairman would always say. E-learning is free learning. So all of that content is now available for all, right, to access. So that was the initial strategy in project number one, right? So project number one built these labs, put these labs out in schools. It affected the schools by improving infrastructure in these schools. We put in internet where internet wasn't there before. We put in Wi-Fi access on the schools where Wi-Fi access wasn't there before, for leading up to the new project. So also more importantly, 11,000 teachers were trained during that phase of the project. So it was a massive, bold project that touched a very vast ecosystem in the educational space. That was focused on grades 10 and 11, right? Mostly grades 10 and 11. 12, I guess, in some GSAT, CSEC, CSEC, not GSAT. So the second phase of the project, the idea was, well, if we did all of that for CXC, let's do the exact same thing for GSAT. That was the concept of the second phase. But as you know, administrations change, and there are various other ideas that come about. Technologies change. There's a lot of thinking going on in the world of education as to the best ways to impart this knowledge. And so the idea and concept of, well, since we put in labs first, let's now do something bolder. Let us give tablets to a certain cohort and try to deliver the same content via tablets instead. And so a pilot project was done, and we now have approximately 25,000, just here under 25,000 tablets were implemented, and that testing occurred. Now, there are some learnings from that. My colleague, Deputy Director Trevor Forrest, will talk about that, and in his capacity as, I'm not too sure which capacity here in today, because you are aware of many hats, Mr. Forrest. So Deputy Director will talk about some of the challenges. But the tablets in schools, again, a tremendous amount of learning came from the 38 organizations we placed these tablets in, and they were across infant, primary, secondary levels, and also, again, I think how many, 1,100 teachers were trained, around 1,100 teachers were trained in that goal. 2,000 teachers trained. Documentation I had updated. Thank you very much. 2,000 teachers trained. How to use technology, how to use this type of technology, integrate with it with the material that they have to deliver to the students. So the question about what strategies we have employed, those are the two main strategies which encompass all the things that we've been doing to digitally bring this knowledge delivery mechanism to the students in the classroom. First was the labs, now it is tablets, supported by, most importantly, I think, and I don't think we're working enough at it with the content. We have a tremendous amount of content that's there that I don't think we're shining enough light on, right? Because all this content is there. And interestingly enough, going out there and doing just my little basic polls, I find that people are actually using the content. And I think we should find a way to shine a light about that. So at a high level, that's what we have done so far. And initially in excess of right now, would want to imagine around 50 to 60 million US has been spent in making all of this happen. First project was about 49, and then the second one, I remember the Jamaican amount is about 1 point little bit billion Jamaican dollars was spent to make all of this happen, because a tremendous amount of infrastructure has to be put in place for all of this to work. So, Trevor, what have we learned from all of this?
Record. All right, thank you, Mr. Record. As I said in the introduction, then, Mr. Record is the chairman of the eLearning Jamaica Limited Board. So we are going to refer now to Mr. Trevor Forrest, because eLearning Jamaica is really an agency of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, which has been the primary driver then in introducing ICT. So Mr. Forrest, he will focus on the assessments of that impact of the e-learning project and the tablets in school. And let me just interject here. I did introduce Ms. Bellany for the IDB. Mr. Trucano is also here to help us then as a discussant in terms of the challenges, all the things that will be shared here, to give us his insights, lessons learned, because he's really coming from the global perspective, right, from the World Bank side, but he also has knowledge of, from country reports and everything. So out of this conversation, we will have, a reality check, all right? So we can start, monitor, evaluate, and move forward. All right, if we don't do that as a country, we will never be able to determine how to improve and how to really achieve our goals. So that's the roles here as we go along. So Mr. Forrest now, who represents, he's from the perspective of Senior Advisor to the Minister of Science, Education and Technology, and in his own right, he is also on the eLearning Jamaica board. Okay, so Mr. Forrest, over to you. Thank you. Assessments.
Thank you. So let me, Chris jokes about the hats that I
that point these days where I don't know which hat I'm wearing when I go where. So, let me just stick to being a director of e-learning and advisor today. I'll just work with that one, this particular. Not hearing? Oh, okay, sorry. I'm a soft-spoken kind of person. So let me first say that thank you for the invitation to come and speak. I've been on the e-learning board twice in similar capacities. And this is a project that, just like Chris, who has the record for participation on this board, is very near and dear to both our hearts. And I spent a lot of time in higher ed when I was abroad, and it kind of brought home a lot of viewpoints and so on. One of the things that we learned, I'm going to speak about the challenges that we experienced. I think one of the major things that came out of the e-learning projects, whether it be the high school or the tablets in school project, and I think anybody from e-learning in here can attest to this, is it's not as simple as you think. It's a very complex undertaking with a lot of moving parts. But that's kind of like at a technical level. But a couple of things that we also found out was that there is a component that exists at the teaching level, the delivery part. It's not a technology problem. This is a completely different paradigm that you're talking about. So one of the things that we found out was, you can decide to put all of this technology in the schools. You go out and you get $50 million and say, look, we have this grand plan, we're going to put all this technology in the schools. But if nobody uses it, it doesn't work. Right? So one of the things we were finding was we would introduce teachers that were going to bring this new way of imparting the knowledge to your students to you. We're going to train you how to use it. Everybody says, yeah, we're excited. And if you train 100, 20 use it. And the reason for that is, when you're introducing technology, there seems to be a natural fear sometimes as to what technology is going to do, whether or not it's going to replace me. But there's also a culture change that needs to occur. And we were finding that a lot of teachers were having a challenge making that shift. As a result, you would go to some schools and you'd see computers that were delivered there still neatly packed away in their boxes and so on. And it's not to say that we didn't get any good results. We got some good results. Because whereas some teachers may have not been as excited, some students were. And as Chris said, there was an idea that you kind of wanted to make the learning a little bit more interesting, more engaging. So you found that a lot of the students now, they were more engaged, they were kind of excited. And being able to access and get greater access, what you find happening now is, students can go and get information, and the whole dynamic in the classroom would shift, because now you're talking more about this bi-directional interaction. A student is no longer just sitting there and listening to somebody who's standing here and talking. It's a situation where students now have greater access, they're more excited, they're asking more questions, they're challenging. God forbid you challenge a teacher. But they're challenging. So you found that coming out of that, a good part of the technology was to re-energize students, particularly male students, which is one of the ideas, again, behind the project. We were seeing that the level of engagement of young boys was kind of slipping. But you found that young boys like to play games, so they naturally were drawn to computers and technology. So you kind of found that the interest kind of got, rejuvenated. That has good and bad traits, let us say, because sometimes what they're terribly interested in is not necessarily what is supposed to happen in the classroom. And I'm going to kind of, given the time constraints, I'm morphing a lot of what happened in the first project and the Tablets in School project into one discussion here. So you find that in front of a computer, they may have internet access. So they're off doing interesting things while class is going on. Similarly with the Tablets in Schools, which the previous minister spoke a lot about. So you find that, yes, there was renewed interest in going to school. There was renewed interest in sitting in front of a computer, but not necessarily renewed interest in doing your schoolwork. All right? So there are a lot of pros and cons of introducing the technology. But I think one of the things that we really got a good idea of is that you can't just drop it in there and expect teachers to pick up, and start using it the way you envision them using it. We had situations where, teachers were expected to use technology, but they never had the technology to take home. Right? This posed a challenge. We implemented some technologies, smart boards, in classrooms. And one of the things that was challenging was there is some preparation required to use these types of technology. And, teachers have it kind of difficult already, preparing for class and doing all this. Adding kind of another level of work to an already difficult job that they're probably not getting enough pay for. So one of the things that, we really got out of it was that, look, let's really try to engage the teachers a little bit more, find out what works for them, and find out how to properly come up with a right fit solution. We'd put some very sophisticated equipment in a classroom, and you'd find that, highly sophisticated projection and smartboard systems were being used as nothing more than projectors. So we had a lot of those scenarios there. A couple other challenges that we found was connectivity. A lot of the schools, and it was a very ambitious project, over 200 schools. Not all the schools were adequately connected. You also had instances where equipment may not have been adequately protected. And these are the kinds of things that typically will happen. But one of the most interesting things that we found, and again, we found this in the Tablets in Schools project, is that when you allow access to information, especially on the internet, you have to be very clever with how you restrict, how you monitor, and again, how you ensure that what you intend the devices, the ICTs to do is actually what is done. So we had a lot of unwanted content being viewed. Tablets may go home and, children don't use them, only parents use them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But these are all considerations that have to be made when you're going down this kind of road. So I think over the past 10 years, a lot of information has been gleaned from what we've done. And I think moving forward, e-learning especially, has a lot of knowledge as to how, the sheer volume of knowledge that has been garnered from what has happened over the 10 years it's phenomenal. I think, though, one of the things we really seriously need to look at, I'll just say this in closing, is, by the way, I haven't over. Good, great. One of the things I think we need to seriously start to do is to look at monitoring more, analysis more, because I don't think that, we're not really innately a analysis and numbers driven type of people. But I think when we're talking about what we're trying to do with infusion of the technology to really get an understanding of how it is helping, if it is helping, I think we need to do a lot more assessment. We need to do a lot more feasibility analysis for some of the things we're undertaking to ensure that when we go, because this stuff isn't cheap, when we go ahead and invest in this, that the people who are really supposed to benefit, who are the students and teachers, and by extension the country, really gets the kind of benefit that is supposed to be derived from this. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, wow. Right, so we thank Mr. Forrest, in addition to Mr. Record, and I'm glad that, they have been there quite a while, so in terms of even the continuity and being able to ensure then that all that is gleaned over 10 years, wow. But we are at that point, as he said, of really reflection, analysis, really determine how to move forward. Okay, I will invite Ms. Beloni from the IDB to share of the experience, because always in our country we have wonderful friends, international agencies, funding partners, and so to share from that perspective of what the IDB has been doing. And then after that we will move and invite Mr. Trucano to ask and comment on his experience. But Ms. Beloni, thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes. Mr. Forrest ended on quite a good note, indicating that more analysis needs to be done in terms of monitoring and evaluation. The IDB, we have done such work, and today I'm going to take you through some of the things that we have done. So you have mentioned, Mr. Eckford, that you have put in place 25,000 laptops, tablets. The IDB and what I will discuss here this afternoon is actually compiling all these different studies, all these different devices that have been put in place across the Latin America and the Caribbean region, and have done that sort of analytical work, which Mr. Forrest mentioned. So how has the IDB evaluated technology in education, and how do you promote effective programs across the Latin American and Caribbean region? Based on the tests such as PISA, TERCE, CERCE, and so forth, what we have observed, and when I say PISA, I'm speaking about the Program for International Student Assessment. In 2012, out of 8 countries in Latin America that participated in PISA, they were among 14 of the lowest performers in maths out of 65 countries which participated. What we're seeing is that students do not have the basic levels of knowledge in math, science, and reading. So overall, we see that the biggest challenge that, go back, please. Yeah. Overall, we find that the biggest challenge that Latin America is facing is, as I just mentioned, it's in education, and really how do you improve learning given what we're seeing in these international tests. We recognize that there is a need to really innovate and think of different ways of learning, and that is where technology comes in. How do you effectively use technology to improve student outcomes and have an impact? Also, we recognize that the demands of the labor markets are changing. We want to ensure that when these students go out there, that they have the skills that the market is demanding. In the region, with financing from the IDB, the World Bank, and other development partners, and also governments have invested quite largely in education and in technology. For us at the IDB, just in laptops only, we have distributed nearly 10 million laptops in the region. Overall, we have seen mild progress in content development, in teacher professional development, and in many cases, we have not seen any academic achievement. However, we say that technology has great potential, but how do we maximize that impact and promote effective programs? When you look at this, this just gives you more or less a breakdown of where these laptops have been distributed. And that does not include, as Mr. Reckford said, when they started with the mobile classrooms, they've moved to tablets. This is only laptops. It does not include desktop computers. It does not include the mobile labs and so forth. So you know the proliferation of technology beyond this is quite large in the region. We ask now two main questions to really frame the discussion moving forward. Which programs are more effective? And once you have found an effective program, how do you scale this up successfully? The discussion I'm taking you through this afternoon is actually a paper, a technical note that was prepared by my colleagues at the IDB from the research department and the education department. And what they did was they reviewed emerging evidence to identify good practices in the region, so in our Latin American Caribbean region, and also outside the region in places like India and elsewhere, and to measure the impacts using rigorous evaluation techniques. And also at the end, to look at some of the analysis of IDB experiences in the region, in the design and implementation of technology in education programs, because we finance quite a lot of these technology programs in the Latin American Caribbean region. If we were to look at a conceptual framework, we see that the resources we have include your infrastructure. So you look at available technology resources to determine the uses that teachers and principals give to them, and then in turn determine how this is going to impact on the skills of the students. So that is what the conceptual framework here says. When we look at resources, we're speaking of devices, connectivity, security, and all these things that my two esteemed colleagues would have identified and mentioned also the challenges. When we look at content, we're speaking of the software, the portals, all the applications, and so forth. And professional development, we're looking at human resources, teachers, principals, parents, really all your ingredients to ensure that your programs are effective. The use becomes a critical link. And in terms of the use, we look at teacher practices and also school management. So actually, what can you use it for, and how effective is that going to be in impacting upon skills? The skills really are your main motivation for implementing technology. And to raise the quality of education. When we look at skills, we're speaking about academic skills, digital skills, or just general skills in terms of socio-emotional skills, 21st century skills, and so forth. Let me just go back one more. When we look, so I'm going to take you through two types of programs. In terms of the research that we did, and we are looking at guided use. When we speak of guided use, we are speaking about 3 S's. We're speaking about the subject. Is it guided towards a certain subject? Is it guided to use a certain software? Is it guided along a specific schedule? So this defines how technology will be used when we speak of guided. When we speak of non-guided, it's basically you focus on just providing the resource. So the infrastructure, the content, with no sort of predetermined schedule, software, and so forth. Based on the research that we have done, I'm just going to take you through an example in terms of Peru, which had an incidence of non-guided use. 900,000 laptops distributed to rural schools in the 1 laptop per child model, 40 hours of teacher training. The content was not aligned to curriculum, that is, it was not predetermined. It was not scheduled, you had no scheduling. And the subject was not specified. What did the evidence show? It had no impact on mathematics or language. It had some impact on digital and general skills. So in summary, you had no impact on academic skills. When you look at the case of India, in the following example, it followed the 3 S's in terms it was get towards a specific subject, it had a predefined software, and it was set on a basis of a schedule. Okay, and what did we see? It had a focus on 4th grade math. It had a game adaptive software. It had 2 hours specified schedule per use, and significant progress, positive impacts were found on mathematics. When we summarize, you're going a bit too quickly. Yeah. If you could just go back 1. Thank you. Forward 1. Okay, stay here. If we look at the evidence, when we have summarized, so what we did, we aggregated different studies and estimated the impact and computed average effects, applying a meta-analytical technique. So basically just aggregating results from a variety of studies. And overall, what we found, on average, we found 0.17 standard deviations overall when we use it guided. Non-guided, you can see, was about 4 times less on average, and significant impact in terms of mathematics from guided. And non-guided, you see the differences. So really, the evidence speaks for itself when you use guided learning versus non-guided. If we were to compare with other educational programs that governments would spend their fiscal resources on, in terms of technology, if you have guided use, so in here we took 76 large-scale experiments in developing countries, and we measured the impacts on academic performance. Of the 10 types of programs that we have along this scale, we saw that the programs that were guided turned out to be the most effective, and the ones which were not guided being the least effective. If you look, they were just before things like money grants that you give to parents and schools to buy educational materials. So it shows you that just putting a laptop unguided in a classroom really has no effect. When we speak of guided use, why does it work better? If you look at the non-guided programs, you put a laptop and it creates a headache for a teacher in a classroom because she's just looking at this instrument, and Mr. Forrest said it quite well. It's just sitting pretty in a box. So it really creates a dilemma for that teacher. Finding effective uses is hard and sometimes time-consuming, and therefore it's just not used. However, if you have a guided use program, it provides a solution to teachers because it's well structured in terms of your subject, your structure, and your software. It has a aligned target in terms of the software. You can ensure that you get adequate use out of it, and it enables motivation, feedback, and opportunities to really monitor. In terms of summarizing the evidence of the study that the IDB has done, what we have found is that non-guided use of technology has really low impact, whereas the guided you find has high impact. When I say high impact, we have to exercise some sort of caution, but I tell you about that later. When we speak of guided, again, just to summarize, we are speaking of the subject, the software, and the schedule. And really, it's important to evaluate, to identify which programs are your most effective one. If we were to look at this diagram, it does not mean necessarily that guided use programs are perfect, because you see the dispersion. while they yield higher returns, they also give higher risk. When you look at the scale for the estimated average impacts for programs that are guided, you see that we go down from negative 0.48 all the way up to 0.37. So you see the dispersion is that much wider. Versus when you look at programs that do not use guided use, you have that sort of, the impacts are much smaller, the dispersion is much smaller, okay? So guided, you tend to have a greater dispersion of results from what we found. When we think of scaling up successfully, what should we keep in mind? We need to keep in mind complexity, and I'm glad that I heard Mr. Forrest mention that word. So really, we have done the empirical work, we have the evidence, but really the practitioners on the field are actually saying the same things that we are finding in the evidence, in the analysis. So you have certain levels of complexity when you want to scale up. You have multiple components, and that's a word I also heard. Sometimes it fails. If something fails, really everything fails. And over time, you need to change your pedagogical practices. How do you face complexity, and what do you recommend to deal with this complexity? Firstly, you should focus on specific learning areas. You coordinate your 3 key components. You evaluate, which is key. You monitor, and you scale up gradually. What has the IDB done in terms of experience in technology in the region? First off, I can tell you in terms of evolution of support, which really goes back to some of the things we heard earlier from the other panelists. In the 1990s, we started with desktop computers, multimedia labs, and we have progressively moved on, transition into mobile labs. More recently, we have moved on to one-to-one computers, and in 2013, in one of our member countries, we started using technology as a distance education tool. Also, lately, we are focusing much more on looking at the impact evaluations of these projects. We are focusing also more recently on research and additional things such as development of portals and so forth. In terms of financing, the bank has done about 187 million in providing technological infrastructure to schools. That has focused really on access to infrastructure in some of our countries in the Caribbean region, as you would see Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana, Barbados. So we actually have this experience in the region. And we have done a few pilots and evaluations, as mentioned earlier, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, because we're really talking about what is live, what is here. What I'll invite Mr. Tricano now to do is not just share then of the global, but based on what he has been hearing, based on his own expertise as a senior advisor, and in terms of, looking at directions, well, the strategy, how can we also implement a intensive strategy for review based on the rich data, based on all that has been shared here. So there has been a reality check, but also how do we then move forward? How do we appreciate all that has been done, all that has been achieved, but at the same time, move in a more purposive direction based on all the lessons learned. So I'll invite Mr. Tricano to share.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'll start my timer. And the folks who heard me speak yesterday will be happy to know I only have 95 slides today. Actually, no slides at all. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share some experiences, really maybe to share some questions. This is not an official World Bank comment on what you've been doing here in Jamaica. I don't feel that that's our place to offer that, but really to offer maybe some questions that we've heard other places ask and see how they might resonate with you here in Jamaica. One of my colleagues joked, I've read I was asked to take a look at some of the policy documents here in Jamaica as well, the policy, the implementation plan, the policy review documents as well. And one of my colleagues joked that you've probably read more of these things than anybody around. I've probably read 500-600 of these, which is not bragging, it's more of a lament. Because after you read lots of these, they start to all blur together. But they blur together, I think, sometimes in good ways as well. You know, I really recommend the IDB report that Ms. Maloney talked about. I think this, you know, to guide or not to guide, that is a question. I think that's a question that we all have when we are introducing something new. How prescriptive do we want to be? Do we need to be? And if we are prescriptive, how and when and where do we sort of pull back a little bit? And Mr. Forrest said that he offered his 2 cents on 10 years of lessons. I'm not sure what the exchange rate is for those, because they're pretty valuable learnings, and they're not learnings that are all that different, perhaps, from many other places around the world. Some of the specifics, I assume, are and might be, but the general sort of path that Jamaica appears to have gone along over the last 2 years, last 10 years, is not all that different from many places around the world. And, you know, all three speakers used the word change at least twice that I heard. And really what we're doing is talking about change here. And we all know change is difficult, certainly in as conservative an institution as the school, as the education system, and our classrooms. And this issue of teachers, I really took to heart, and many places around the world we've seen that this is a costly lesson that they've had to learn, and some of them have still not learned this, about the complexities introduced at the point of learning and instruction with teachers. When you add something new and make it more complex, you shouldn't be surprised that very little happens. And this is why I think the guided use approach, certainly in the early stages or over time, is a very beneficial one. Because, as Mr. Forrest said, you know, the simple mechanics of use really aren't simple at all. And really, we're talking about a change in culture that is required. And it's you know, when we throw a technological solution at a problem that is really not technological in nature, there are going to be frictions that are introduced. You know, a number of things, I think, over time, and hearing the focus on devices and connectivity and devices over time in Jamaica, and now it seems like a renewed interest in this connectivity issue. We see in countries around the world that however much connectivity they introduce in schools, it's not enough. Because the more you get, the more you want, the more you use, the more you need, and the more devices you introduce, the more you need. So if you benchmark yourself, if we have 20 laptops in a school, and then we have 60 laptops in a school, all on at the same time, what does that mean? You know, Australia a couple years ago, they changed their benchmarks to 2 devices per child in a school concurrently running. Because they said that if kids have a tablet and they have a phone and they all turn this on at the same time, what is going to be the impact on our network? So this is really a moving target, I think, that we see around the world related to connectivity. You know, in reviewing some of the policy documents, and I think it echoes some of what I heard here, I looked at some of the things that I don't see there that I see in some other places. And it might be that they have no place here in Jamaica or at this point in time, but I just thought I would highlight some of these things in case they might be of relevance or of interest. One of them got to a point that all the speakers have talked about, which is about the place of monitoring and evaluation and the capacity to do that. The political will, I guess, as well, underpins that. And the necessity of creating institutions and capacity to do this sort of evaluation is not easy. And you mentioned, so I don't know that you made sort of a joke about data-driven decision-making here in Jamaica. I find very few education ministries around the world that are really data-driven in their approaches. And now with technology, we have an opportunity to get lots of data. And sometimes the worst thing, even worse than having no data, is having too much data that you can't make sense of. And you can then maybe be directed down sort of the wrong pathway because of that. Some other things that I haven't seen in the policies, and maybe they're not appropriate or appropriate yet here, is thinking about, in addition to a monitoring and evaluation function as part of a policy, is a unit or something devoted to innovation specifically. Thinking about that's apart from monitoring and evaluation. And monitoring and evaluation has 2 components in and of itself. You know, some places around the world say, and I think rightly, that we can't assess impact unless we know what's actually happening in the school. Fair enough. And a natural way to do that is, well, we send school inspectors around, and let's have them report on the technology use in schools. That seems to make a lot of sense. But in thinking about monitoring and evaluation, is this meant to be a policing action, or is it meant to be an action for learning? And this is a question that many ministries of education struggle with. They want to know what's happening in their schools, but they want to leave space for experimentation. And as built into policy documents and implementation plans, ways to learn first before you come down hard. I think that's been a lesson that many countries have learned the hard way. You know, Malaysia, which has lots of technology in their schools, when they first introduced it, they were, I would say, hyper-prescriptive. They actually had the number of hours a month that teachers had to use technology, and they checked them against it. Now, this was artificial, for sure, and students and teachers were evaluated according to how often they used the technology. The good thing is it got used. And once people started to use it, they sensed other things they could do with it. The bad thing, of course, was that it was used really poorly, and outcomes went down. And recognizing this, next door in Singapore, they said, they're on their fourth master plan, ICT and education there, they said, you know, looking at the experience of our neighbors and our own experience, we actually reduced the curriculum by, they said 10%. They just made up the number because of what happened in classrooms and the amount of time lost by teachers trying to figure out how to use this new stuff. And there was a pressure. Do we get through all of the curriculum while using this new stuff? No, we are responsible for our students, our parents, our supervisors, so we're not going to use it. So they actually decreased some of the amount of the curriculum for one of the 5-year periods as a way to allow for the integration of the technology as well. A couple other things that I don't see mentioned in the policy documents here in Jamaica that strike me, and again, they may or may not be relevant here, are specific attention to equity issues. These are there for sure, but in thinking about the impact of technology use among and in some of the toughest communities and toughest learning environments, oftentimes we need different strategies or more attention to these sorts of things. Because I guess as those of you who heard me speak yesterday, talking about those who are better able to take advantage of the technology, the better school, the better teachers, they're going to do better. And what are the implications for that? So a focus on equity. And related to that is on accessibility. So as we put out devices and the content that runs on those devices, and we know that over time, the devices will change and the formats will change, thinking about a path forward to allow for that change and that as many people as possible can access the content, this is of critical importance. You know, I was just in Kenya where they have a huge program. They're distributing 1.2 million laptops, just started 2 weeks ago, and they've been developing digital content, and they were developing it in Flash. So for years, and those of you who develop content, so that just doesn't work anymore. And they hadn't thought from the start about accessible standards and writing things in ways that when the technology changed, the content would change with it. And so as part of what they're doing now is they're really putting a big focus on accessibility of content. Another thing that is sort of the frontier issue we see in many places around the world relates to data privacy and ownership of data. You know, where teachers create content, do they own it? Can they sell it? Does the Ministry of Education own it? Does that matter? Student data, things that students create, do they own it? Who has the rights to see it? Do they have the right to that data once they leave school? These are sort of frontier issues in many places, but they're coming very quickly as more and more technology is in our schools, and as people who use it then graduate and leave schools. Is that still theirs? Who does it belong to? And then this issue of just in-school and out-of-school use. You know, we see sort of 3 basic types of educational technology policies, I think, around the world. One is developed by the Ministry of Education. One is developed by the IT Ministry. And one is developed, I would say, in the Executive Office of the President or Prime Minister. And the Ministry of Education policy is often very instrumental, because they're the ones in the schools. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. The Ministry of IT policy is often, I would say, very grand, and maybe not always as practical as it could be because they're not actually working in those schools. And it tends to be more hardware focused. And the executive policy is almost always just about transformation. And it's meant to be about the entire system. And there are elements of all of those things, I think, in the policy environment here in Jamaica. But I just wanted to make the point that sort of who writes the policies, for whom, makes a big difference. And we see that in countries around the world. The audience for the policy is as important as who writes it. And who writes it is as important as anything. For many countries around the world where I ask to see their policy, and they say, oh, we don't have an official policy. And I say, you don't have a policy at all? And they say, well, we have these documents. And I say, have people seen these documents? Oh, everybody knows these documents. They've never been made official. We've been using them for 8 years. And I said, well, that's interesting that everyone came together as a sense of what to do. Who was involved in putting together this sense of doing? And we facilitated these policy dialogues in many countries around the world. And our take from many of these exercises is that really who's in the room when you put these things together is as important as what the policy actually is. Because you have buy-in from within the ministry, or from across the education system writ large, or from across government, across civil society, across the private sector as well. So who's involved in putting together the policy can make a critical difference as well. We heard mention of filtering. Some countries come down very hard on filtering as a policy objective. Some don't. Some leave it to local schools to implement. Some do it at a national level. And oftentimes this is reflective of larger approaches to how centrally planned government is. But that was interesting. And then I guess the other thing that was interesting to me here in Jamaica was about the ecosystem perspective. And thinking about in policy documents, some of these policy documents and implementation plans lay out the full ecosystem there. And they say we're the Ministry of Education, but not only do these groups, are they important partners, here's how they all fit together. And here are what we assume their responsibilities to be, and this is how they would be and should be funded. So those are some things that jump out at me from some of the policy documents that I've seen. Lastly, I guess I'll say that whether or not a policy is tied to a specific initiative or objective, whether it's about getting computers in schools or connecting them, versus whether it's part of a larger educational reform, I think that's often the fundamental tension and really impacts the utility and the importance of the policy going forward. But whatever the case, I think, and we've seen it, whether or not Jamaica has a new policy, an old policy, an unofficial policy, some countries have multiple policies. There's one country I know that has 5 active policies done by different parts of government. It's the experience that you have, and it's the capacity to learn. When I point to places around the world where people can learn from what's going on, I don't look at policy documents at all. I can show them sample policies that are good or not so good. But I'd say, look at the people who really have battle scars. Look at the people, and if there are a lot of them, that's a place you can go for, if not answers, for the questions you should be asking yourself. And I think in Jamaica a lot has been accomplished, but I also think a lot has been learned. And a way to institutionalize some of these ways that you learn and to think about ways of creating feedback loops within your policy and implementation plan, that might be useful. And you don't have to make them up. You can just look at how you've learned over the last 10 years and try to align some of your organizational structures and incentives to help do that.
Right, the last keywords, learn. We're in a mode now to learn, okay? And we're going to invite persons from the audience. Also, it's really about a dialogue. We say round table, so we have heard quite a bit, and I hope our awareness has been increased. What we want to do is to have dialogue and to make suggestions even about how best to move forward. I'm sure as educators largely in the room, we will think that the education sector now has to be this unifying force across all the areas. And certainly thinking about IT in education, we then have to look at what exactly is our role if we're seeing technology as a means to the end and not the end in itself. So I'll invite questions because we have heard quite a bit. I'm going to ask for help with the mics, roving mics. All right. And then we'll invite, based on the question you ask, we'll then determine who is best, or we'll have from our August panel here indications of who will take that question. Okay? Thank you. All right, so we have one question. Just identify yourself and, in fact, which institution you're attached to. That helps us in terms of any context also.
Okay.
Thank you.
Test. Okay. Good evening again. I'm Ricardo Gale from Cloncarty Primary, which I manage the tablet in school program there. I know you say you direct the question to someone there, but I was directing it to Mr. Forrest.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, Mr. Forrest, I heard you said some things, because you were looking at things learned from the whole implementation of the project. And for me, being grafted into the vine and seeing how I could make it work for the school, seeing the problems that were existing, and giving my recommendation. Being here in this setting with you, I'm going to direct a few questions at you and a few suggestions as well. Okay. All right. All right. Let me be direct. The tablets, they were restricted, because I heard you said, well, there were some problems, and so you got the tablets restricted, and so that students can do certain things. But even the tablet that I have, it is so restricted. I want to do much more, but I can't really do what I want to do. It seems as if the operating system was modified. You can go to Play Store, you can take a picture. Yeah, I can't do anything with the tablet really, but maybe browse the internet. So is there anything in play? Is it that we can now go back to Geo and ask them to remove the modified version and put on the original operating system on these tablets? That's a question. I'll leave it at that.
Just one question then. If you give us the two quickly, that's what I want. The two are to Mr. Forrest. Just go ahead with the second one also.
Well, I heard
restrictive tablet and the second
who is involved in putting together the policy. It's very important. I heard that. I mean, some of us need to be consulted, like the persons within the school, the technology persons. I see initiatives now being taken to consult them. I think we need to be consulted more, because I really want to do a lot to them, but I'm restricted.
Okay, thank you. It's both question and comment, but I think we got it. Mr. Forrest, your turn.
Okay, so let me answer his second question first.
I agree with you. There needs to be more consultation, and I kind of alluded to that in what I was saying. So I agree with you there. As it relates to who writes the policies and so on, there's no one person that writes a policy. It's a process that creates a policy. But if it is that you know, we need to broaden the consultative exercise that is involved in creating the policy, then that is something that you know, you take on the advisement and take steps to do. Your first question, though, you know, you have to be mindful of certain things, right? Even though I'm sitting here with these interesting titles and stuff, it doesn't detract from the fact that I'm a hugely technical person. Okay, so I understand where you're coming from. I'm gonna make a statement. I'm gonna share something with you, and it is something that, you know, in personally looking at how things were being done, because we heard that complaint a lot. the device was restricted. I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. I wanted more, more ability to do things. Now, there are a couple of things that we've started to do and started to encourage at e-learning, and hopefully will transfer through to the ministry. One, I personally think that the methodology that was used to secure tablets may have been a little flawed. Okay? Let me just put that out there, because there are better ways of doing it, while at the same time giving you flexibility. But the other thing that I think we need to seriously look at, which we are now encouraging, our people at e-learning to really start to consider and to really start to get the headspace into the fact that, look, e-learning's purpose is to implement what the client, who is Ministry of Education, wants. Okay? It's a loaded statement, because what tends to happen sometimes is, and in the example of the tablets, right? And yeah, I say Isaac sit down in there so I can take set on him a little bit. One of the things we found that was being done was we were sizing and speccing tablets based on a price, not what you wanted it to do, right? So we were worrying about the price before we got to the point where, look, this is what we need it to do. Let us try to get it to the point where, if Ministry of Education or the teacher, them say, listen, this is how I want to use this thing. The students, this is how I want to use this thing. Let us try to get it to that point first before we start worrying about the price. And then we start to look at ingenious and clever ways of getting what we actually want in a way we can pay for it, right? So where you find that your need, and it's not only your need, a need of a lot of teachers is to get more freedom, more flexibility, which will make it more comfortable for them to use the technology. I think what you're going to find, hopefully moving forward, is that there's going to be more flexibility and perhaps more engagement to find out, look, what do you want to do? And based on what you want to do, this is how we're going to attempt to provide that solution. So we're not going kind of, pigeonhole ourselves by saying, boy, it needs to fit this price. If the teacher doesn't get to do what they want to do, well, we just couldn't afford that. We have to strike that balance. So I think you might find that there may be a shift, and you might see some changes with what is going to be delivered moving forward with some of these solutions that are going to come out of e-learning, because I've had some, discussions with the team at e-learning. Say, listen, change the mindset, find out what they want, find out what they need to do as his teachers, the Ministry of Education. Let us work towards getting to that point. Now we're about, how we're going to pay for it, because there can be some interesting ways to solve that problem. But let us not try to put you in the difficult situation before we get there.
But I'm talking about the basic needs. Tablets supposed to have basic functionalities, right? Things like taking a picture and all those things. Now, with you moving from the government managing the program remotely to class sets, mean that you give it to the school, and the school have more. All right, with the implementation of the class sets, meaning that the school have more say in how the tablets are used.
Okay. Again, you are on a very, very interesting point, and I don't really want to cut the energy level. Right. I'm also going to suggest that based on the consultation, even afterwards you can have a one-to-one with Safari. Okay. But if what I'm hearing is clear in terms of flexibility moving forward, is that there will have to be consultation to look at what the needs are and the wants. So I'm hoping, and I will be one of the persons helping them to hold us all, because this is the purpose of this forum. So hopefully we will have the sort of consultation and some of the details based on your experience that we can then include. All right, so Mr. Forrest, we will continue, certainly e-learning Jamaica. So that's part of the general. Mrs. Abraham? All right, can we get a mic quickly to Mrs. Abraham and then all right, so those are...
I don't think we need to handle that in here. I think we can...
Right,
Yeah,
we'll have
let's
to...
not get too technical, don't we?
Follow, right. Okay, we will have to follow up about what are the needs, what is best, what's practical. So that point is heard clearly, all right? That's where we are, and that's part of the reflection and looking back and seeing how we move forward. So we have noted that point. This session, all the questions, we are recording them. We have a rapporteur here. We are recording them because this is one of the focal points of this conference to move forward, okay? May I have another question? Yes, the gentleman at the back who has the mic now. And, let's focus on the question and then we can determine how best to move forward. Yes.
Patrick McDonald, teacher, Roger Clark High School, formerly Balaclava High School. My question has to do with the maintenance of the equipment and is directed to the directors of e-learning. Are there any plans in place for the maintenance? My school, for example, is on the program for 6 or 7 years. Now we have equipment failing. What do we do? What next?
All right, short pointed. Mr. Recker?
Yes,
There are plans for maintenance. We are having those, we've had those discussions between Ministry of Science, Energy, Technology and the Ministry of Education. It has been a topic, ongoing topic for a while as to what's next. And well, most I can say is that you'll hear some information soon. But we are, Trevor Forrest mentioned a while ago that it's complex. And this is a very complex undertaking in putting this amount of infrastructure in schools for the amount of schools that we have done it for and in the phase basis that we have done it for. And so that follow-on support, obviously, it has been part of the discussion and it has been happening because Isaac, Nicholas and the team, they have been on the road doing work, but of course, replacement and big ticket
replacements have been our sore point with respect to budget constraints. So it's something that we're working on.
Thank you. Mr. Kikano wants to comment on maintenance.
Just one comment about maintenance. Everywhere around the world, this is a challenge. Absolutely. And it's expensive. And there are many ways of addressing this. One is you buy stuff that will last longer, but that's more expensive. And sometimes it's easier to put those costs into the future, of course, and do it. There are other ways of thinking about bringing the maintenance down. I don't know if in Jamaica this has been considered, but we see, for example, in Macedonia, in southeastern Europe, what they said is we can't keep this equipment working, and we've had it longer than we were planning to do. So they set up computer clubs for students who were first-level technical support in schools. And this had a couple of advantages. They didn't have to call to a district office or the central ministry and wait a day, a week, a month for someone to come out for the basic stuff. The kids were trained on how to do this. They're certified, and a side benefit, which actually turned out to be a real benefit, was that it brought students and gave them responsibility in schools, some of whom who didn't have responsibility before. Some of the kids who were seen as, oh, those are kids, those aren't our best students, and they gave them a sense of ownership of the equipment and responsibility, and they were looked up to by school officials. So it met a couple needs, I think. I don't know if that's relevant to here. Perhaps you do it, but it is, yeah.
No, thank you, and I just want to add, it should be very relevant because we're talking as a country to move beyond using the equipment to being creators and maintainers of the equipment. And this is where I want to throw that certainly the alignment across our education system with the tertiary education system. We have technical schools, we have universities, we have other areas. So this is one area we really need to look at in our country since we don't have unlimited financial resources, right? Okay, so that's an area we also want to follow up in terms of maintaining equipment as a country. How do we maintain the various things that we need to move ahead? All right, so let me move on now to the third question. Thank that gentleman for that question. The third question, you have the mic?
Yes, I have the mic.
Okay, just identify yourself and then proceed with your question. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon. I'm Michelle Stewart McCoy from University of Technology. My question has to, well, I'm listening to the presentations and I'm mindful of the one laptop per child project. And I am reminded by what Mr. Forrest said about analysis, documented analysis. So my question has to do with that question, that aspect. How current is the analysis, the documented analysis that we have that speaks openly and honestly to successes, challenges, solutions, training, tracking, and so forth? How current is the analysis, the documentation?
Mr. Forrest? I'm not sure. Or you did it open. Okay. But either gentleman, Mr. Forrest.
Yeah, I feel that one must target it. Feeling
like I'm the target of many questions this evening. I don't know what happened. Okay, so there's some, because I've actually myself read through some of the documents and analysis that have been done. Some of them are quite recent. There was an assessment done for the Tablets in Schools program. There was also one done for the overall high school project. So, and let me just clarify something. The problem is not doing the assessment, you know. It is what kind of assessment or analysis that you do. So I can say, listen, I can say, look, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to find out what the usage of laptops or usage of tablets is. But we kind of have to look at these assessments in the context of what it is that we are meant to do in the first place. And we do assessments like that, but at the same time, we also have to look at some of the other external things that may not have been covered, let us say, in the initial mandate for a project. So you may find that in doing an assessment, you kind of go an extra 2 miles to say, look, here are some things that you really need to consider that wasn't even part of your plan. So as my colleague here was pointing out, there are some things that we don't have in some of our policy documents, and there are some things that are glaringly omitted from a lot of the assessments that I've read. But I think it is important that we determine what it is that the analysis and the assessment and those things are going to do. So let me give you an example. When we're doing the Tablets in School project, critical things that should be done. We have ideas, we have dreams, we have goals, we have visions. But then when it comes to a feasibility study, we might not necessarily do one of those before we start. So you find that when we start the project, it looked good. But then some interesting things happen. And then at the end of the project, we do an analysis that focuses on some of the things that didn't work that could have been figured out if you did a feasibility study. And you're focusing on some of the negative aspects that could have been figured out from the beginning, instead of, okay, here are the things that really mattered, as it relates to, deployment or usage and so on of this thing. So we kind of have to pay some more attention to that kind of stuff. What kind of analysis are we trying to do, and to kind of look a little bit further than just, the run-of-the-mill analysis.
Thank you, sir. If I may just take it a little bit further. The fact that you have spoken about the analysis, the question that I want to ask, or the question that I think I'm trying to get across is the access to this public documentation about the analysis. What is there that exists that speaks about school profiles, learner profiles, teacher profiles, that speak about the ongoing training, that speak about the tracking, the digital divide, the access, that kind of thing? What kind of documentation exists?
Right. So I can just say that, whether I don't know how public it is. I mean, I know I've read and seen documentation. I mean, I don't know if you can speak to that. It's okay. It's available on the eLearning website, but I can tell you, I've read documentation that speaks to a lot of some of what I think you're asking. So I'd probably encourage that you go check the eLearning site for some of those. If you can't find it, talk to me after this. I'm not going to give out my information and get bombarded. Come talk to me after this, because I know it's there. I mean, eLearning has done a lot of this kind of analysis, so I know it's there.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to follow up on that in terms of what's available. Okay, one person has it mic now, and then there's this gentleman. We maybe take another two or so. Yes, go ahead with your question. Identify who you are.
Hello, everyone. Claudia Forbes here, Magati. Hi. Something was mentioned yesterday. Dr. Bada mentioned something yesterday. Thought somebody else would have mentioned or asked this question already. Mr. Forrest.
Because it's simply because he dealt with all the challenges. And everyone is resonating with the challenges, right?
Okay.
Fire away to Mr. Forrest. Notice I'm struggling with a cold here. I'm not even supposed to be here. So I'm very happy that everybody's... Trevor, run please.
Mr. Forrest or Dr. Chacon could address the issue. In many other rural areas, connectivity is a major issue. Not just the schools, but when you're home. Yes? I heard Dr. Bada mention something about the offline Wi-Fi, and I thought that is a beautiful concept. I don't know much about it, and I'm asking, can e-learning provide that source that for us, so that when we do offer or give the children assignments or whatever, they can go home and access this offline Wi-Fi and get it done. Because we have a major concern with this concern. Okay? Connectivity issues. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to do a shameless plug right about now. So you're absolutely right.
There is a connectivity challenge, especially in rural areas, that it'll take some time to get that sorted out. However, an initiative was announced a couple of months ago, and I'm gonna ask you to stay with me on this thing. There was an initiative announced by the now Minister of Technology, and it spoke to what was called true universal access to
government websites and educational material. Does anybody recall this?
Right. In which, no, that's not open data. This is zero rating of
access to certain types of content, specifically government and content provided by the Ministry of Education. But what that means is,
if you have a mobile phone or a data capable tablet, or even if you had internet at home, and like I said, stay with me on this, right? Stay with me on this. If you had a smartphone that had data capabilities, one of the things that this initiative was meant to do was to ensure that if you were connecting to a government website or, say, the CREM or any educational material that was created or provided by the Ministry of Education, it would cost you nothing. Okay? Now that exists right now. Okay? So if you are a Digicel client or a Flow client, you are able to take your smartphone and turn it into a hotspot at home, as long as you have signal, and we have some pretty good coverage across the island. Create the hotspot at home with your device and access the internet and those specific sites that way, okay? At no cost to you, so it doesn't affect your data plan. Now, the idea behind that was to remove the barrier of connectivity as long as you had the right devices and so on. Because we realized that there are some challenges getting the kind of connectivity in the rural areas in a fast enough time. Work is being done to do that. So one of the other hats that I wear is I am the deputy chairman of the Universal Service Fund. And there are efforts being made now to accelerate getting connectivity to the rural areas more. Additionally, over 200 and odd community access points have been deployed across the island. Okay? Challenge with that, and I mean, we're talking access points with computers and internet connectivity. Challenge with these access points is people don't know where they are. So you may have a situation where children in rural areas don't have the facilities at home, but an access point may be close by, but they don't know it's there. So they lose out on that. Additionally, there are discussions surrounding, and we haven't really mapped out in the finer details how we're going to do that, but also expanding the kind of Wi-Fi availability around a school. Expanding the Wi-Fi availability around a library, a post office, a police station, those kinds of things. Because again, Universal Service Fund is mandated to ensure that, you know, we provide that kind of access. So from that standpoint, which is very true, very relevant, there are some serious efforts being made right now to address those kinds of problems, because it's a real one. Kids go home, they can't do homework. That was a problem with the tablets in school, pilot, because once you left school, you couldn't access. So the True Universal Access initiative, which, like I said, is in effect now, over 200 odd sites you can access. If you have a smartphone with hotspot capabilities, test it out. It should not affect your data plan. In fact, we've taken it to the point, and this one isn't done yet because it's being implemented, that if you had an internet service at home, so you have Lime or Flow or Digicel internet at home, and let's say you, for whatever reason, you owe money on your bill. Even if you are in arrears for a specific period of time because they have their contractual policies and obligations, you will still be able to access the specific government sites and education sites. That is happening right now.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask Ms. Beloni to also comment on that. Okay, thank you.
It's more or less, I'm not adding more to your plate, Mr. Forrest, but having heard a few of the things that you have indicated earlier, it there may be the need to have more public awareness around the policy and also about the capabilities of what exists.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, thank you.
Right, that's one of our purposes here. In fact, I was about to ask, just for a reminder, how many different
ICT policies do we have in the country? Education, state? No, I'm just counting the number of ICT policies from the different sectors.
There's
Just
one
remind
ICT
us.
policy, you know.
One ICT policy and then one ICT policy in education, which is also emerging.
Yeah, so there may be an education ICT policy or initiative.
one ICT?
There's one ICT policy.
Yeah,
all right.
One.
I just wanted to reinforce that because I'm aware from one of the presentations that sometimes we have different sectors all come in. And so that is key as we increase awareness and as we have the consultation. I will invite maybe just two other questions. Sorry, Mrs. Avril Crawford wants to comment. Oh, because there was that gentleman behind you, right. And then after that, we'll maybe take one other. I see a hand there. Okay, and then Mr. Isaac. Okay, so yes, just identify yourself and...
Michael Arnold, the other side. Some of our schools, we don't have the heavy alumni, so there are cost constraints. Now, one of the things that dawned on me was that this e-learning project came under the energy ministry, yet we didn't make a push in terms of maybe putting solar facilities in schools so that that cost would now have been open for the schools to use that money more in terms of repairs or taking care of equipment and so on. So I want to know if there's any thought on that, you're redirecting some funds to helping the schools put in solar facilities so that we can get rid of some of the electricity costs to help.
So just one quick bit of information. When the project started, energy wasn't part of the ministry.
So that's it is now, but at the time it wasn't. And just to it was right. So and just to also say that, trying to be as politically correct as I can, there's a struggle as to what you can use the money for in terms of universal access. It has to be directly universal access. Power is important. Right, power is important, but I say at that time it was not under that ministry. Yes, Ms. Crawford, you have a...
All right, thank you. Yeah, Mrs. Crawford, you have a comment?
Not on that point.
Any comment?
Something else? Yes. I'm really asking both the backs. How do you really determine the impact of the technology? I was particularly concerned about that chart that you had that showed that even for the guided intervention, there was somebody who -4. There had been no improvement at all. And certainly we always have this discussion with the education persons that there may be other interventions in the schools. For example, we're doing a lot to do with maths. And so there are all kinds of things happening in the schools with respect to how you teach maths and what you use to teach maths with and so on. So the fact that we put technology in those schools and the maths results improved, how do you know that it was the technology that really caused that improvement?
Orange Bellon.
Well, hence the reason why you need, before you start, to put in place proper impact evaluations. So you have a control group, have your treatment group, and determine what the effects are so that you can isolate to determine if that particular intervention of the tablets what have contributed to that particular result or impact that you now see. So to really answer your question, you need to put in place some rigorous impact evaluation when you start up the program, and then you apply some of the effects.
So I'm certainly not going to argue against that. That absolutely is the case. But also, so the first thing we look at, and it may be a good measure or not, is why the country is doing it, what their state of objectives are for doing it. We know, of course, in some places the objectives actually aren't educational at all. That may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing, but that is a fact of life. But we also know that there are other, let's say, externalities that are worth trying to detect and then trying to measure. And I think this comes back to the ability of the Ministry of Education or whatever groups to have the capacity to do evaluations of various sorts and have to have some of that internal to the ministry, have it developed in the universities, and perhaps when the Ministries of Education can give at least, make public statements to help direct some research, that can be very useful. Because of the educators in the room, we all know trying to figure out impact and what led to that impact is very difficult. And education is something where the benefits accrue over the long term, typically not over the short term. And things that may work in the short term may not work in the long term. And while randomized controlled trials are the gold standard, they're also very expensive. And thinking about how we can make decisions about, do we pay for a big expensive evaluation? Do we just have sort of quick and dirty evaluations? I think having the capacity to do that, I think, will be a differentiator for success for ministries of education and education systems going forward in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much. And even as we have heard, as you said, from the banks, the amount of research that is already out there in terms of best practices for us always to continue learning from. I think there was, okay, one other hand before Mr. Isaac, so I'll take that question. Just identify yourself. Yes, please.
Mr. Forrest, you're off the hook. Don't worry. This is not for you. You get a break. My question is perhaps more for the chairman. What are you but anybody else can dive in. What are you excited about that's in the pipeline? And how do you see some of the stakeholders here playing a role, whether you're an educator or you're a policymaker, you're implementing? It can't be one directional, and we've been talking about challenges, and they're real, but what do you see coming?
Thank you very much for that question, Ruth. I did not ask her to answer that question. What am I excited about? What I'm very excited about is a setup. All right. What I'm very excited about is the fact that as we had said earlier, eLearning Jamaica takes instruction from our client, and right now our main client is the Ministry of Education. And so jointly from the Minister of Education and the Minister of Technology, I'll just shorten it and call it that, technology, our latest instruction is to focus on early childhood education. And so I'm very, very excited about how we are going to go about using technology, and whether it's, tablets. I mean, I know the discussion happened earlier about, our focus seemingly on its hardware and all that. But however it is, I'm very excited in figuring out how we're going to use the technologies that we have afforded to us to impact early childhood. Because once we touch early childhood in this economy, nothing can touch Jamaica if we do it the right way, right? So I'm super excited about that. And just yesterday, just a side note, the private sector organization in Jamaica had awarded Mr. Butch Hendrickson. And when you sit down and listen to what him and the national organization have done around Bold Ones Initiative, Little Learners, and a lot of their programs, I mean, they're pushing for intervention around early childhood. And so I'm very happy that, we've been given this instruction to go that way. And so how can we all be a part of it? I said, excuse me, I'm suffering from a little flu. I'm not even supposed to be here. As Director Forrest said earlier, and I think he said it to Ricardo, right, that we need to collaborate a little bit more, so some better intervention in us understanding the needs of those types of institutions and those types of specialized learning methods for early childhood, and how we can then put them into technology, how can we leverage all the technologies that we have afforded to us to make that impact at that level. So that's, I think, is feedback from persons who have those expertise, those understandings, methodologies, the various pedagogic support for early childhood. That's how I think we can work together. So we are ready. I think right now we are waiting, right? Avril, we're still waiting on some clarification from Ministry of Education to push forward. Just about got it. So that's that's unfortunately what happens to us a lot. There's a fair amount of waiting around for things to happen and decisions to be made. because if it was in private sector, then somebody's responsible to pull the trigger, and you go. But for us, there's approvals and processes, and there's a fair amount of, well, I don't want to overheard the red tape, but yes, a little bit but sometimes it's just transparency. You want to make sure that this thing is above board and, nothing funny going on.
Okay, thank you. And just as a stakeholder from the tertiary level, I'm looking at Mrs. Maxine here because it means to do anything for early childhood. It means that some of the tertiary institutions who facilitate early childhood would then have to be brought in. So we're talking about an alignment of the education sector. Okay, so even if we say early childhood is a focus, we know that the early childhood teachers will have to be trained through the tertiary levels. All right, thank you. We have to just take Mr. Isaac's comment now. I see that hand there, but we do have to close because we will have to take a break. One quick question, and you're directing it to Mr. Open.
Tablet in School project that was piloted in 38 schools will be continued.
Is that a yes or no answer?
Yes. Will be. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So now I invite
In some form.
You're making a comment by this one, Mr. Okay, you have the mic.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Isaac McCullough from eLearning Jamaica, and I'm directing this to the banks. You mentioned better schools, better teachers, better students may take more advantage of technology, and possibly the reverse for poor students and so on. What are your thoughts about being more prescriptive for the lesser schools and being less prescriptive for the better schools, teachers, and students?
So I don't know the policy environment or the political environment here in Jamaica. I do know that one challenge that many ministries of education have when they implement technology is they look at the early adopters and the pilot instances and try to learn from those. And you often find very good teachers. And then you try to take what works for them and it doesn't work. And then they say, actually, we should direct our gaze maybe to the average teacher. And let's think about how we can impact most of the teachers across our teacher corps. But the problem is that most teachers, of course, are not average, right? Just like most students are not average. And we aim at only one sort of profile. I think we're in danger of not meeting most people's needs, or we're meeting them insufficiently. So I think targeted interventions for specific groups, I think, are entirely appropriate, especially when we're talking about equity issues. Because if we believe in education for all and learning for all, the all is kind of the important part of that.
Yes, thank you.
So one last shameless plug for e-learning. Go to the e-learning booth. Lots of information around what e-learning is doing, what e-learning has done. Do not hesitate. E-learning is free learning.
Okay, you still want to answer? Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll just invite Mr. Tricana.
If I may just share before you go, one very quick anecdote and one long question for Mr. Forrest. Now I'll skip that part. We'll save that for later. But one anecdote. You know, about 10 years ago, I was doing a lot of work in Asia. And there was a very advanced school in a country. A lot of the elites sent their kids there. And they came to me with a challenge. And it was a new challenge for them because previously they'd put all this technology in their schools and it wasn't being used. And this was a problem. And they fixed that challenge, and it was being used a lot. And they found that they had all sorts of new challenges. As part of introducing technology in schools, they wanted to foster what they said were 21st century skills. And these were things like collaborative problem solving and interpersonal communication and critical thinking skills. And a principal of the school came to me and said, you know, we have a challenge because we have a final project that the kids do. We have 123 kids in our graduating class. And based on our rules of plagiarism, 121 of them have cheated. Because they have on the internet shared information, shared facts with each other, in ways that seemed entirely consistent with this desire to create 21st century skills that were in contravention of their plagiarism policies. And they couldn't fail 121 of 23 kids. There's no way they could do that. So it was a real challenge for them. And so I just highlight this issue of if the challenge is not getting the technology used, you're going to have even a bigger challenge once the technology is used if you don't change other sorts of things. You know, 3 years ago, they started a pilot project in Denmark where they had not open book, but open tech tests, high-stake tests at the end of secondary school where they allowed access to the internet. And their thinking was, in the world, outside the classroom, kids will be exposed to each other, they'll have information from all different places, and the real challenge is to make sense of that information and do something with it, not recite it. Because in the future, if a computer can do it, if you can Google it, you know, if a computer can do it, a computer will do it. And if we're raising our children to do with technology what computers can do better, we're raising them for guaranteed obsolescence. And so thinking about changing what we want students to do enabled through technology as opposed to what they did before, I think is a fundamental challenge for all of us, for educators. Because computers can do certain things well. Humans can do certain things well. We should be enhancing the abilities of students to do what humans can do well and to take advantage of what computers do best. And I think together, that's really the challenge of all of us who work in this ed tech field.
And I think on that note, that right away brings us back to our theme, the whole thing of ICT and the human factor. How to have change agents in for social and economic transformation. So there's a lot to think about, a lot to chew on. A lot of work has been done. We want to really congratulate and celebrate that which has been done, even demonstrated here at this conference. But as this session, the focus in on eLearning Jamaica, a lot has been done. Thanks to the good reminder. So as we prepare even to meet back for 7 o'clock. The exhibitors are there. They are inviting us. Mr. Record did a good ad for us. eLearning Jamaica, certainly. But to my left, when you go through the door and you turn left, all the exhibitors are there. I want to just use this opportunity to thank our panelists for sharing out of their experience. The passion was there. And in terms of just the way forward, I'm glad the sort of commitments that were made here on the stage, we do have it on tape, and so we're looking forward. And a reminder to go to the website because I'm glad about the emphasis on even the analysis going forward, that we learn and we move forward, okay? So we're going to explore the website, see all that is there, and we're going to take up different parties here on their word, but we're glad also from our representatives from the 2 banks in just sharing what else is being done across the world. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have a lot to learn, but certainly we are conscious of our local context, and there's a lot, even in Jamaica, that even as we begin to share and evaluate our own selves, we may find that there are a lot of lessons to share with the rest of the world. I want to use this opportunity to thank, in particular, Mrs. Jackie Cousins, who has consulted, especially with Mrs. Maxine, to even look at a policy brief or in terms of the broad remit for this panel, because we regard it as one of the core sessions of the entire conference. I'm going to invite Mrs. Maxine Henry Wilson to come forward and just to thank each of our representatives with a token from the EduVision eLearning Jamaica Conference. Thank you very much. Mrs. Wilson. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I know everyone is interested in going either to the exhibit or getting ready to go to the banquet. This is just a token, and we have given you an EduVision back because we don't want you to forget your commitments that you have made. And we don't want you to forget all these wonderful people here who have every confidence that e-learning and ICT education is going to make a difference in their lives and in the lives of their children. Thank you very much for coming. We see this as a centerpiece of our conference, and we'll be using it for another conference that we're going to be having with the Latin American and the Caribbean on virtual education. Thank you, and that's a token.
So thank you very much. Mr. Chicano from the World Bank, Mr. Forrest from the Ministry of Science, Education, Technology, Mr. Record, Chair of the eLearning Jamaica Board, and Ms. Belloni from the IDB, okay? And so our next session will be at 7 p.m. We will be in the grand ballroom on the southern tower. And so you have just a little break to go. Please look at the exhibits. And then I know we'll put on our fandangas and everything. And we will come out and have a good time to celebrate awards those who have done quite a bit of work. So thank you very much. Yours truly, Jeanette Bartley-Bryan here. And we look forward to seeing you at 7 p.m. Thank you.